Adolf Hitler is remembered by history as the dictator who led Germany into the devastation of the Second World War. His public life was built upon an image of power, authority, and unwavering commitment to politics. Yet behind the stage of history, in the quiet corners of his private world, there existed another story. It was a story he rarely allowed to show, a story of affection and attachment, of secrecy and tragedy. Tonight, let us drift through that hidden part of his life, the story of Adolf Hitler's love affairs. In his teenage years, long before politics or war, young Adolf lived in the Austrian town of Linz. It was between the years 1905 and 1909 that he developed his first silent infatuation. The girl's name was Stephanie Isak. Hitler never spoke to her, never exchanged a single word. Instead, he admired her from afar. He followed her quietly when she walked through town, he imagined conversations that never happened, and he dreamed of a connection that only existed in his mind. To Stephanie, Adolf was just another young man on the street. She never knew of the thoughts he carried about her. It was not a real romance, but rather an early glimpse into the difficulties he would face in forming genuine emotional ties. This infatuation faded with time, but it marked the beginning of his complex and hidden world of relationships. 2 decades later, by the mid-1920s, Hitler's life had changed completely. He was no longer a struggling youth, but a rising political figure in Munich, attracting followers and building a movement. It was during this period, in 1925, that he grew close to his half-niece, Gysi Raubal. Gysi was young, bright, and full of life. She moved into Hitler's residences, first at Obersalzberg and later at his apartment in Munich. Their relationship quickly became intense. Hitler was deeply possessive of her, restricting her movements, controlling who she met, and demanding her constant presence. By 1929, their attachment was widely known within his inner circle. Some described it as romantic, others as suffocating, but all agreed that Gysi was central to Hitler's personal world during those years. For Gysi, however, the relationship grew increasingly difficult. She longed for independence, for freedom beyond Hitler's strict control. By 1931, tensions between them were high, and in September of that year, tragedy struck. Gysi Raubal was found dead in Hitler's Munich apartment. A pistol lay beside her, and her death was officially declared a suicide. Hitler was devastated. He withdrew from public life for days, overwhelmed with grief. Some of those closest to him later said that he never truly recovered from the loss. For years afterward, he kept her memory alive, leaving her room untouched and carrying her photograph with him. To Hitler, Gysi was perhaps the deepest personal attachment of his life, and her death left a wound that remained with him until his own end. In the shadow of this tragedy, another relationship began to take shape. In 1932, Hitler met a young woman named Eva Braun. She was working as an assistant in the photography studio of Heinrich Hoffmann, Hitler's personal photographer. Eva was 17 years younger than Hitler, cheerful, light-hearted, and far removed from the world of politics. Unlike Gysi, she was never placed at the center of his life. Instead, she remained in the background, carefully hidden from the public eye. Hitler wished the German people to see him as a man married only to his political mission, and so Eva's existence was never officially acknowledged. Throughout the 1930s, Eva moved quietly between her family home in Munich and Hitler's private residences, most notably the Berghof in Obersalzberg. She filled her time with photography, keeping albums of life at the mountain retreat, albums that still exist today and provide rare glimpses into Hitler's personal world. She loved animals, fashion, and films, and those who knew her said she brought a sense of ease and lightness into Hitler's otherwise stern life. Their bond, while often distant, endured through the years. As the Second World War began in 1939, their relationship remained strong, though always kept in secrecy. Eva was not involved in political discussions or military decisions. Her world was centered around personal companionship. Despite the challenges of secrecy and long absences, she remained loyal to Hitler for more than a decade. Even in the darkest days, she chose to stay with him. By April of 1945, the world around them was collapsing. The Soviet army was closing in on Berlin, and defeat was inevitable. While many around Hitler chose to flee, Eva made a different decision. She entered the underground bunker in Berlin, determined to remain with him until the very end. In the early hours of April 29, 1945, as the city above burned, Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun were married in a small civil ceremony. After more than 13 years together, she had finally become his wife. Less than 40 hours later, on April 30, the two ended their lives together. In that moment, Eva Braun became not only Hitler's last companion, but the only woman he ever married. There were other names whispered in the background of his life. Winifred Wagner, a family friend closely tied to the legacy of the composer Richard Wagner, was rumored to have admired him deeply. Unity Mitford, a British socialite infatuated with Hitler, moved to Germany in the mid-1930s to be close to him. Yet none of these relationships were lasting, none as deeply tied to his fate as those with Gysi Raubal and Eva Braun. Across the years, from 1905 to 1945, Hitler's private life unfolded quietly behind the heavy curtain of his public role. From the silent infatuation with Stephanie Isak, to the tragic bond with Gysi Raubal, and finally to the long, hidden companionship of Eva Braun, his affairs of the heart were marked by secrecy, possessiveness, and ultimately by sorrow. For the world, Hitler projected an image of a leader devoted entirely to Germany, a man who belonged only to his nation. But behind closed doors, he carried a private story, one shaped by longing, control, loss, and loyalty. It was a story rarely spoken of, yet deeply human. A story that reveals that even within the darkest figures of history, there exist fragile threads of affection and tragedy. And so, in the quiet spaces of history, we see that Adolf Hitler, remembered for war and destruction, also lived a life of secret attachments. His heart, like his public image, was marked not by joy, but by shadows. From the innocent dreams of youth, to the sorrow of Munich, and finally to the last vow in a bunker beneath Berlin, his love affairs were always hidden, always complex, and ultimately bound to his destiny.